You wicked, lazy servant. Take this worthless servant and throw him outside into utter darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. These are the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 25. And these are some pretty challenging words to hear. When we think of Jesus, we think of someone who's filled with grace and compassion and mercy. But in Matthew chapter 25, we see Jesus talking about judgment. And the way that he talks about judgment is harsh. It's actually difficult to read, but it's filled with hope. This past Sunday, I talked from Matthew chapter 25 about the parable of the talents. And this is a really famous parable that Jesus tells. And in this parable, he gives three different servants, three different amounts of gold, and asks them to go and bring back a harvest. He's going to be away and asks them to go and bring back a harvest. And so two of these hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But one servant hears these really harsh words, "You wicked, lazy servant." And so what's Jesus talking about here? You know, when we read words like this, it's important to take them to heart. It's important to say, well, what's he saying? What kind of warning is he giving? And in this passage, this is actually a series of 4 parables that Jesus tells after Matthew chapter 24, where he talks about his return. He talks about his second coming. And these series of 4 parables, Jesus uses really harsh language that is difficult to hear. It's difficult to wrestle with. And he's actually directing these harsh words, not at people on the outside, not at what churches usually call the sinners, the people that are on the outside doing things that we would consider sinful or down. He's actually talking specifically to the Pharisees, the elite Christians of the day. And if you're a church person who calls Jesus Lord, these parables are actually directed at you and I. And in this parable, and as we studied it and looked into it, we came to discover that the people Jesus is directing this harsh judgment at are people that have been given a gift by God but kept it to themselves. They decided, I'm too afraid to go and do what God's asking me to do, so I'll just keep it to myself. I'm afraid that I'll fail. I'm afraid that I'll let God down. I'm afraid that I'll do something that he's unpleased with, and so I'll just keep it to myself. And Jesus looks at this servant in this story and says, "You wicked, lazy servant." And my desire, the deep longing of my heart, is to hear the words of Jesus one day when I'm standing before him, where he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my rest." And in this parable, we discover that the way we hear those words is to just take this awesome message of the gospel that he's given us and share it with the world. It's risky, it's messy, and sometimes it's difficult. But what Jesus is challenging us to do in this parable is to take what he's given us, the grace, the mercy, the compassion, his love, and just share it with the world around us. Don't keep it to ourselves. Don't stay inside of the safe confines of our churches, but to take this message and share it with the world and tell of God's love. And not the way to do that isn't just by getting up and preaching on a Sunday or being a part of a worship team, but it's by saying, "Jesus, I'm willing to take the gifts, the abilities you've given me and use them for you. Just use me the way that you will." And so that's my challenge to us this week is together as a church, are we proclaiming the goodness of the message of God, the hope that is in Jesus Christ to this world?